You know, I seriously thought I was going to die. Having grown up in the ocean, I have been scuba diving and snorkeling and lifeguarding for years. I have swum with whale sharks and great white sharks, with dolphins and gigantic manta rays, but it has always been right at the top of my bucket list to one day swim with humpback whales. And there are only two places in the whole world you're allowed to do it. One is in Tonga, the other is in Moorea off the coast of Tahiti. Which is why this summer, on our sabbatical, our family headed over to Moorea to try to swim with the humpback whales. We had been out all afternoon trying to find them. We would find some whales and get in the water, but then every time we did, they'd either swim in the other direction or dive down super deep, until our guide, Marima, at one point was swimming out looking for whales, and he found a mom and her baby resting deep down, far down under the surface. He looked up, he said, "She looks like she's about 40 to 50 feet and about 40 tons. Gulp? What? Nevertheless, 8 of us slipped off the boat, and as quietly as we could, we swam over to where Marima was, and we put our masks down in the water, and we squinted and stared as deep down into that deep blue abyss as we could, but we just couldn't see anything until we saw this one little white flicker in the shadows, and then another smaller one, and then we saw the one little white shadow move away from the bigger one, but the bigger one was coming more and more towards us, getting bigger and brighter, coming straight up at us. Really, at me. Now, I have been told that humpback whales are very gentle and careful around swimmers, that they're super aware of their surroundings, incredibly agile and nimble, and never come too close to the snorkelers. But this one was rocketing straight towards me. I wasn't sure if she didn't see me or was mad that we were near her baby, but she was moving like a freight train, and I felt like there was going to be no way to try to avoid her 40-ton snout hitting the middle of my chest at like 30 miles an hour. Now, I'm going to show you a video of this in a minute, and I want to make it clear, it looks like she's moving slowly, but don't be fooled. It's like when you see those giraffes on the wildlife shows and they're running across the Serengeti at like 40 miles an hour, but it looks like they're running in slow motion because they're just so big. Well, it was the exact same thing with this whale. And as she was coming towards me, I remember actually thinking to myself, well, if I have to die sometime, I guess this wouldn't be the worst way to go. And I was just about to close my eyes and prepare for the impact when suddenly this massive barnacle-covered body flexed and curved and gracefully arched directly below me. Her 40 or 50-foot back just racing just below my fingertips. I braced myself again for the impact of her tail, as big as the tail of a 747. But once again, at the last moment, she dipped her tail and it glided right under me. I guess better than describing it, I ought to just show you. The person filming it wasn't me. One of the other 8 were off to the side and were able to film this, but you'll see me at the very end with my yellow flippers. So you want to see what we did with our summer vacation? There I am. All right. There is a gentle power being released into our world tonight. A restrained, life-giving, life-protecting kind of power. 2023 years ago tonight, a quiet revolution was sparked that confounded and challenged all of our most dearly held impulses and presumptions of what real power looks and feels like. The great Protestant reformer Martin Luther called it left-handed power. He said it was the power of this manger and of this child and of this night. He insisted that there is a power in vulnerability and in weakness and in innocence that is infinitely stronger than all of our traditional notions of power combined. On the other hand, right-handed power, he said, is the power of this world, of governments and money and smart bombs and military might. It's a power of fear and an intimidation and prominence and glory and egos and position. Right-handed power is a hierarchical, top-down kind of power based on coercion and posturing and bravado. Martin Luther said that as followers of Jesus Christ, we always should be suspicious of right-handed power because it is so easily corrupted, it never lasts, and it almost never ultimately wins. He said that the biggest downfall of right-handed power is that it's always on the verge of being toppled. All you have to do is let your guard down for even 1 minute, and a new military will come along that has a few more bombs than you do, a few more bullets than you do, It's a little more fanatical, or it can instill a little more fear, and suddenly you have been replaced. But the deep truth that's being demonstrated to us tonight is that there is another kind of power, a creative power that's rooted in kindness and gentleness, in forgiveness and compassion, in justice and tenderness and mercy and love. Left-handed power is a power that's based on humility and vulnerability. Martin Luther insisted that left-handed power was by far the most powerful force in the universe. And he said that when we commit our lives to this child, to this person of Jesus Christ, we are committing ourselves to become champions or advocates, to become instruments of this left-handed kind of power in our world. Whatever you believe or don't believe about this story tonight, about the star and the manger and the wise men and the shepherds and the virgin birth and that Christmas lobster, this story has been told and retold year after year, written down and then proclaimed for a very specific reason. Every sentence, every word was carefully chosen and crafted by Luke to remind his readers that there is a stark choice that each one of us has to make in this life. As you may remember, I'll give you a quick history lesson. At the time that Jesus was born, the Roman Empire was in its heyday, at the apex of its golden age, in full control of everything, everywhere. This is the Roman Empire that most recently all of these American men have confessed to thinking about multiple times a week. Have you heard about that? This viral TikTok survey? That was Jesus' Roman Empire. Just before Jesus, Julius Caesar, things had started to fray around the edges. You remember that he was killed, murdered by his best friend, Brutus, and he had to deal with the rebellion from Antony and Cleopatra in Egypt. And yet, when he adopted his son Octavius, who became known as Caesar Augustus, Octavius crushed all rebellions that were happening, including this one in Egypt. He brought the empire back together, and he ruled it with an iron fist. It actually turned into an unprecedented time of peace and commerce that was referred to as the Pax Romana, the peace of Rome. But it was a prosperity that was based on ruthless power, on might, military might, and violence, and intimidation and coercion. No dissent was tolerated. Even the smallest rebellions, as the Jews found out over and over, was crushed swiftly and mercilessly. And yet many people were convinced that this was the ultimate peace that Caesar had ushered in, and as the divinely appointed king of the final penultimate kingdom of the world. And he had all sorts of official titles that showed his ultimate kingmanship. It was no secret. His titles were all over the Roman coins and the sides of their buildings, all throughout their documents. Caesar was called over and over the Savior, the Son of God. He was given very specific titles. He was called the Prince of Peace, the Lord of Lords, the King of Kings. In fact, it was a common phrase around the empire when Jesus was born to talk about the euangelion of Caesar Augustus, the good news of Caesar. And people said that of his kingdom, there would be no end. Do you see what's going on here? This story that we listen to tonight and every year on this night was written and proclaimed by the early Christians to be a deeply subversive, politically charged, narrative-flipping kind of challenge to the entire accepted order of Jesus' day. The entire way that people understood power and prosperity and peace. It was this urgent, crystal clear call that there is a choice to be made, a choice between two very different versions of the ultimate kingdom. A choice between two very different versions of power, between two different kinds of sons of God and princes of peace. One based on military might and politics and money and economics and conquest. The other one based on love and mercy and justice and compassion and equality and humility. A peace and prosperity that doesn't come through military conquest, but from surrender to a little child. There is a cosmic tug of war going on this night, and really every night, but particularly this year as we prepare our hearts to welcome this child once again. Our world has clearly gone off the rails in recent years. So much war and violence and confusion, so much polarization and hatred and division and strife, both around our globe and even here in our own backyards. There are more than enough poor choices to go around. Even when people are trying to do the right thing, we get caught up in this disappointing, heartbreaking cycle of misdirected fear and resentment, of action and reaction, of retribution and revenge. Perhaps the clearest voice that I've heard since this war in Gaza has begun has come, ironically enough, from our own Secretary of State, Anthony Blinken. Soon after Israel had invaded Gaza and we started getting video of Palestinian children being pulled from the rubble, there was one particular video that Blinken watched of a small girl, maybe 7 or 8 years old, being pulled from the rubble, limp and barely alive. And he said in an interview, he said, "I look at that little girl and she could be my little girl. I look at her and it is like she is my little girl." And truly, this is our only hope. Because until we understand that every Palestinian child is our child, that every Israeli child is our child, that every Ukrainian and Russian child, every Iranian and North Korean child, every Jewish and Muslim child is our child, we are doomed to keep descending deeper and deeper into that black hole of despair that Laura mentioned in her sermon last week. Look, I do not want to mince words, especially not on a night as important as this one, because we all have a choice to make about which version of power we are going to live our lives for. Because there is an entirely different notion of power than what the world embraces. It's this left-handed kind of power, and it dwarfs all of the others. It is a power that is released in the birth of a child and the vulnerability and innocence and hope that this baby brings into our world and into our lives. I want to close with another video clip now that our family has gone completely whale crazy. I want to close with a clip from this new show that's out on Disney Plus called Incredible Animal Journeys. Have any of you seen this show at all? I have never seen cinematography like this in my entire life. I think it might be 8K, but it doesn't even look real. This clip starts off with a female humpback being pursued by a pack of huge, fast, powerful males who are fighting and jockeying for the right to mate with her. And it looks, when you're watching this, it looks like the epitome of a bunch of guys flexing their muscles and showing off their right-handed power. But then just watch. Look and see what happens when these crazy males realize that she is not just any female, but she is about to become a mom and is giving birth in one of the most spectacular wildlife moments that has ever been caught on camera. Watch this.
Long before us, great travelers were crossing our oceans, risking it all to ensure the future of the next generation. This female humpback whale is exhausted. She's journeyed 3,000 miles to escape the cold, stormy seas of Alaska and find sanctuary here in the predator-free waters of Hawaii.
Look how clear that is.
But she can't rest yet. "30-ton males. Over 20 of them. Hot on her tail. Battling for a chance to mate. This time of year, scientists observe these aggressive heat runs almost every day. But what happens next comes completely out of the blue. Suddenly, the chasing stops. A tiny tail. This ocean voyager is about to become a mom. Humpback births are so rarely witnessed. No one's ever been this close. Her pursuers seem to have had a change of heart. They've become her protectors. The lead male blows bubbles, forming a screen. That allows this cautious mother a moment, shared only between her and the deep.
Tonight, the birth of this child has the power to stop us all dead in our tracks, reminding us of who we are and whose we are, of what actually matters in this world and what real power looks like. Tonight, the invisible veil, this invisible shield that's rising between our world and the next, becomes so paper thin that it's almost as if we could reach right through it and touch the very face of God. Tonight is the night that leaves no shred of doubt that there isn't anything that God wouldn't do to come and find us, to break into our world and woo us back to the power of love and hope, compassion and gentleness, of equality and vulnerability. And the good news of this night is that you do not need to do anything in order to make this happen. In fact, there is nothing that you can do. The God who created you and loves you, the God who wants to be involved in your life, does not expect you to come and find him, but is literally crawling across the universe on his hands and knees as a little infant, reaching up from the manger and pleading for you to pick him up and hold him close to your heart. And the question that looms this year, every year, is, are we willing to not just gaze down upon that manger from afar, but are we willing to pick up this child and allow our own lives, our own hearts, to become the manger where he and this left-handed kind of power can be born anew? Do that, and this night, this moment, could become one of the best of your life. Do that, and you will take your rightful place in the very healing of our world. For unto us a child is born. Thank you for sharing this sacred and holy night with us. Amen.